The rain beats against the windows of the National Archives building in Washington, D.C., each droplet carrying the weight of forgotten time. Inside, beneath fluorescent lights that never sleep, an archivist's gloved hands pause over a leather-bound registry from 1871. The pages turn, January, February, March, and then nothing. Not torn pages, not water damage, but a deliberate absence. Where photographs should be cataloged, only blank spaces remain, as if someone had reached through time itself and plucked away the visual memory of an entire decade. The registry continues in 1880, as though 7 years had simply never existed. This is not an isolated incident. From Boston to San Francisco, from the smallest county courthouse to the grandest metropolitan museum, the pattern repeats with mathematical precision. The photographic record of America between 1872 and 1879 has been surgically removed from existence. Glass plate negatives from this period should number in the millions. The technology had matured, photographers were plentiful, and America was documenting its post-war transformation with unprecedented enthusiasm. Studios lined main streets from coast to coast. Matthew Brady's assistants had scattered across the continent, each carrying the knowledge of capturing light and shadow. Yet when modern researchers attempt to locate original materials from these specific years, they encounter a void so complete it defies statistical probability. The Library of Congress, holder of the world's largest photographic collection, shows a mysterious gap in its acquisition records. Private collections that boast comprehensive coverage of the 1860s and 1880s fall silent during the 7-year span. Even family albums, those intimate repositories of personal history, seem to have been edited. Their pages from these years removed with surgical precision, the silence begins to speak its own language. In 1872, something shifted in the American landscape, something that required the erasure of visual evidence. The few photographs that claim to originate from this period raise more questions than they answer. Their chemical composition doesn't match the standard album and prints of the era. The paper stock is wrong, the tonal range inconsistent with known photographic processes of the 1870s. More disturbing still, when these rare images are subjected to modern forensic analysis, they reveal signs of alteration, not the crude manipulation of the period, but something far more sophisticated. Shadows fall at impossible angles. Architectural details that should align with known buildings from the period show subtle but significant deviations. It's as if someone reconstructed these images later, working from memory or imagination rather than reality. The omission extends beyond simple absence. Newspaper archives from the period, typically rich with photographic reproductions and engravings based on photographs, show a peculiar shift in their visual content. Where one would expect to see detailed cityscapes and portraits, there are instead crude sketches, clearly drawn from imagination rather than photographic reference. The Chicago Tribune's extensive coverage of the city's reconstruction after the Great Fire of 1871 relies entirely on written description after March 1872. The San Francisco Chronicle's documentation of the city's boom years contains no visual record between these crucial dates. Even more telling, advertisements for photographic services, abundant before and after this period, virtually disappear from newspaper pages during these 7 years, as if the entire profession had temporarily ceased to exist. The cognitive dissonance grows sharper when examining the peripheral evidence. Railroad companies, meticulous in documenting their expansion across the continent, show completed routes in their 1880 records that appear to have materialized without construction documentation. Entire towns listed in the 1880 census have no photographic birth certificates from their supposed founding years in the mid-1870s. The architectural surveys of major cities jump from showing modest post-war buildings to elaborate Victorian structures, with no visual evidence of the transformation. Government contracts for photographic documentation, standard practice since the Civil War, show a mysterious halt in procurement between 1872 and 1879. The U.S. Geological Survey, established in 1879, references photographic surveys from the missing years in their founding documents, yet these referenced images cannot be located in any archive, public or private. The investigation deepens when examining the photographers themselves. The biographical records of prominent photographers of the era show strange gaps. Alexander Gardner, Brady's former associate, supposedly continued working through the 1870s, yet no confirmed work exists from the missing years. William Henry Jackson, famous for his Western landscapes, has a meticulously documented career, except for this precise period, where his whereabouts and output become mysteriously vague. More troubling still, obituaries of photographers who died in the 1880s and 1890s often reference their lost work, From the 1870s, speaking of collections destroyed in fires that have no record, floods that left no other damage, or mysterious confiscations by unnamed authorities, a pattern emerges when mapping the absence. The missing photographs cluster around specific geographic regions and subjects. Urban centers that would later become industrial powerhouses show the most complete absence of documentation. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, cities that supposedly transformed from modest towns to industrial giants during this exact period, have no visual record of their metamorphosis. The photographs that disappeared weren't random, they were selected. Someone or something wanted to erase the visual evidence of what America looked like during these crucial years of transformation. The first anomaly appears in the chemical records of photographic supply companies. Orders for silver nitrate and albumin paper, carefully logged for tax purposes, show consumption rates that indicate massive photographic production during the missing years. Yet the photographs themselves have vanished. The scope expands when international archives are consulted. British, French, and German archives, typically rich with American photographs from traveling documentarians, show the same precise gap. The Royal Photographic Society's extensive collection includes thousands of American images from the 1860s and 1880s, but the 1870s section contains only empty sleeves and catalog numbers with no corresponding images. The Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris holds detailed correspondence from French photographers working in America during the missing years, describing photographs they were sending home, photographs that never arrived, or, if they did, have since been removed from the collection. Even more peculiar, customs records show these shipments were received and processed, yet the images themselves have vanished from existence. The established narrative of American development in the 1870s relies entirely on written accounts and illustrations clearly drawn from imagination rather than observation. History textbooks show the same handful of questionable images, recycled endlessly, their provenance unverifiable. The story of America's Gilded Age transformation rests on a foundation of words without pictures, testimony without evidence. Academic historians, when pressed, acknowledge the unfortunate gap in the photographic record, but dismiss it as coincidence. Multiple fires, floods, and archival mishaps all conveniently occurring within the same 7-year window. Yet fire leaves ash, floods leave water damage, and mishaps leave paper trails. The photographs from the 1870s left nothing, as if they had been carefully, deliberately, systematically erased. A second layer of mystery emerges when examining the technical patents from the period. Between 1872 and 1879, the U.S. Patent Office recorded numerous innovations in photographic technology, new chemical processes, improved cameras, revolutionary printing methods. Yet no examples of photographs using these patented techniques exist. The inventors themselves become shadowy figures after filing their patents, many disappearing from public records or dying under questionable circumstances. George Eastman, who would later found Kodak, spoke in his private papers of the lost knowledge of the 70s, referring to photographic techniques that had been suppressed for the public good. What public good required the suppression of photographic innovation? What images were so dangerous they required not just hiding, but the elimination of the very means to create them? The unknown territory reveals itself through absence. Insurance company records from the 1880s reference photographic documentation of properties from the missing years, using these phantom images to assess claims and establish valuations. Court records cite photographic evidence from the 1870s in property disputes and criminal cases, yet when modern researchers attempt to locate these exhibits, they find only empty folders and references to materials removed by federal authority. The federal authority in question cannot be identified. No agency claims responsibility for these removals. Freedom of Information Act requests return. Form letters stating the requested materials never existed or were destroyed in accordance with standard retention policies that conveniently cannot be produced or verified. The paradox crystallizes when examining the population records against the photographic void. The 1870 census recorded 38.5 million Americans. By 1880, that number had grown to 50 million. 12 million people appeared during the exact years when photographic documentation ceased. These were not immigrants passing through Ellis Island under the camera's eye. Immigration records show normal, even reduced flow during these years. These millions materialized within America's borders without leaving a single photographic trace of their arrival or integration. Cities that doubled in size show no construction photographs. Communities that appeared wholesale between censuses left no visual founding documents. It's as if 12 million people emerged from darkness into the light of the 1880s, their origins deliberately obscured. The mechanical details of the suppression reveal sophisticated coordination. Photographic plates from the era were fragile, requiring careful storage. Yet the infrastructure for such storage existed and was utilized before and after the gap. The missing plates weren't destroyed by neglect, they were removed. Storage facilities that should have held thousands of plates from the 1870s show evidence of retrofitting in the 1880s. New shelving systems installed where old ones were mysteriously absent. Climate control systems added to spaces that had supposedly never held sensitive materials. The Henry Ford Museum's Restoration Department discovered in 2003 that their storage vault, supposedly built in 1885, showed construction techniques and materials that suggested it had been rebuilt, not built, with evidence of an earlier structure carefully erased. The dual reality becomes apparent when comparing American development with global patterns. European cities photographed extensively throughout the 1870s show gradual documented growth. Asian ports under Western influence display year-by-year visual progression. Yet America, the nation most enthusiastically embracing photographic documentation, shows only a before and after, with the crucial transformation years erased. The contrast suggests not technical failure, but deliberate action. Someone wanted the story of America's transformation to be told in words, not images. Written accounts could be controlled, edited, revised. Photographs, with their stubborn insistence on capturing reality, threatened a narrative that required flexibility. The question transforms from what was hidden to what was being constructed in its place. The hypothesis forms reluctantly, fighting against reasonable thought. What if the America that emerged in 1880 was fundamentally different from the one that existed in 1872? Not just industrially or economically, but structurally, architecturally, perhaps even demographically. The missing photographs might have documented not growth, but replacement, not evolution, but substitution. The 12 million new Americans might not have been immigrants or births, but something else entirely, a population exchange hidden behind the veil of the missing years. The cities that seemed to spring fully formed into the 1880s might have been exactly that, complete urban environments that appeared rather than developed, requiring the destruction of evidence that would have shown their sudden manifestation. Contradictory evidence surfaces in the private papers of Cornelius Vanderbilt's estate. His personal secretary's journal, discovered in 2015 in a sealed vault, references viewing the prohibited photographs in 1878, describing images that showed cities unlike any we claim to have built, streets wider than our plans ever indicated, buildings whose architecture defies our understanding of our own capabilities. The secretary was dismissed shortly after this entry, his later life spent in an asylum, where he insisted until his death that they showed us false histories and made us forget the true ones. His testimony was dismissed as madness, yet his descriptions match those of 3 other industrial barons' confidants who suffered similar fates after claiming to have seen documentation from the missing years. The global context emerges through diplomatic correspondence. British Foreign Office files, declassified in 2001, contain references to the American situation requiring careful management of public perception during the 1870s. Russian diplomatic pouches intercepted by British intelligence mention the transformation and population replacement in America. Though the full context remains classified, Japanese records from the early Meiji period describe American visitors in the 1880s as different from those who came before, noting changes in manner, speech patterns, and even physical appearance that suggested a new race of Americans had emerged. These observations were dismissed as cultural misunderstanding, yet they persist across multiple independent sources. The emotional weight of absence presses against logic. Families searching genealogical records find ancestors who seem to appear from nowhere in 1880, their claimed histories before that date unverifiable. Cities celebrate founding dates that have no photographic commemoration. Entire architectural styles attributed to the 1870s exist only in post-1880 examples, their supposed evolution during the missing years undocumented. The National Trust for Historic Preservation maintains a database of structures supposedly built during the gap years, yet none have construction photographs, and many show architectural techniques that weren't formally invented until years after their supposed completion. The silence becomes deafening when those who should speak remain mute. The revelation arrives not through discovery but through pattern recognition. The missing photographs weren't destroyed because they showed something forbidden. They were destroyed because they showed nothing. Empty cities, just as the evidence suggests. Streets without people, buildings without inhabitants, infrastructure without purpose. The America of the mid-1870s may have been a vacant stage, awaiting players who would arrive in 1880 to begin the performance we now call the Gilded Age. The 12 million who appeared weren't born or immigrated. They were introduced, placed into ready-made cities whose empty years had to be erased to maintain the illusion of continuous habitation. The photographs would have revealed the truth. America underwent a reset, a replacement, a fundamental transformation that required the destruction of all visual evidence. The consequences cascade through subsequent history. Every major industrial development, every architectural achievement, every technological breakthrough attributed to American innovation in the 1880s and beyond rests on foundations that cannot be visually verified. The robber barons who supposedly built their empires during the missing years have no photographic documentation of their rise. The workers who supposedly flooded into factories have no visual record of their arrival. The transformation of America from agricultural nation to industrial powerhouse happened in a darkness so complete it had to be deliberately maintained. The few photographs that survived or were created later to fill the gap show inconsistencies that multiply under scrutiny, architectural styles that wouldn't be invented for decades, technologies that didn't yet exist, faces that belong to no genealogical line. Parallel evidence emerges from Mexico and Canada, America's immediate neighbors. Their photographic records from the 1870s remain intact, showing normal development and growth. But at their borders with the United States, the photographs show something else. Massive military buildups, quarantine stations, and what appear to be refugee camps, populated by people fleeing southward and northward from America. These images, long misidentified as relating to local conflicts, show too many American faces, too many English language signs, too much evidence of an exodus from, rather than to, the United States. The Canadian Pacific Railway's archives contain correspondence about managing the American refugees and preventing them from speaking about what they've seen. These refugees disappear from history after 1880, either returned to an America they no longer recognized or absorbed into Canadian and Mexican populations with new identities. The return to the core question brings a chill of recognition. Why did thousands of photographs from the 1870s disappear from American archives? Because they documented an America that officially never existed. Empty cities awaiting repopulation, abandoned infrastructure awaiting new operators, a vast continental stage being reset for a new act in human history. The entity or entities responsible for this transformation required not just physical control, but narrative control. Photographs, with their uncomfortable tendency to preserve unedited reality, threatened a story that required careful cultivation. The missing archives aren't missing because they were lost, but because they were eliminated. Their absence as carefully orchestrated as any presence could be. The temporal reevaluation forces a recognition of patterns within patterns. The 1870s weren't unique in American history, but part of a larger cycle. Similar gaps appear in the photographic record at regular intervals, always coinciding with periods of supposed rapid transformation, always followed by populations that seem to emerge from nowhere, always accompanied by architectural and technological leaps that defy gradual development. The daguerreotypes of the 1840s show empty cities later claimed to be thriving. The photographs missing from the 1870s hide the same secret. The digital records being selectively corrupted today may serve the same purpose for future generations. Each reset requires the erasure of evidence. Each new beginning demands the destruction of proof of what came before. The lost world reconstruction reveals itself in shadows and implications. The America that existed before the reset of the 1870s was both more and less advanced than we believe. More advanced in its infrastructure, cities built with techniques we attribute to later periods, transportation networks that exceeded contemporary engineering understanding. Less advanced in its population, sparse, perhaps dying, possibly already abandoned when the decision was made to repopulate. The photographs would have shown this world in transition, caught between abandonment and renewal. They would have revealed the machinery of transformation, the process by which 12 million people were introduced to replace those who were gone. These images would have destroyed the fundamental myth of American continuity and progress. The true purpose emerges from the rubble of destroyed evidence. The elimination of the photographic record from the 1870s served not to hide a crime, but to enable a rescue. Something catastrophic had happened to America's original post-Civil War population. Disease, environmental disaster, or something more exotic had created a continental empty zone that required rapid repopulation to prevent total collapse. The new Americans, wherever they originated, were introduced quickly and efficiently, placed into pre-existing cities and given histories that extended backward through the erased years. The photographs had to disappear because they would have shown the transition, the empty years, the period when America was a land without Americans. The alternative narrative that this was natural growth and immigration required the destruction of all evidence to the contrary. The scientific and technological analysis of surviving artifacts reveals impossible contradictions. Building foundations supposedly laid in the 1870s used concrete formulations that weren't patented until the 1890s. Steel beams and structures dated to the missing years show metallurgical properties that required techniques officially developed decades later. Most telling, the urban planning evident in cities that supposedly grew organically during the 1870s shows systematic design that suggests central planning rather than natural development. The street grids, utility systems, and architectural uniformity speak of cities built all at once, not evolved over time. These cities were photographed extensively before 1872 and after 1880, but the images that would have shown their sudden appearance, their empty years, their transformation from vacant to inhabited, these are the photographs that were destroyed. The validation of authenticity becomes impossible when the evidence has been eliminated. Every claim about American development during the 1870s rests on written accounts that cannot be verified against photographic evidence. The few images that allegedly survive from this period fail every test of authenticity, chemical, contextual, and technological. They are recreations, fabrications designed to fill a gap that was deliberately created. The real photographs, the ones that would have shown America's empty years and sudden repopulation, were destroyed so thoroughly that even their destruction left no trace. This level of coordination, this completeness of erasure, suggests not a conspiracy of individuals but a systematic effort by forces capable of controlling archives across an entire continent, possibly across the entire world. The motive for concealment transcends simple political or economic concerns. The truth about America's missing years would have shattered not just national mythology, but the fundamental understanding of human civilization's continuity. If America could be emptied and refilled, if 12 million people could be introduced without origin, if entire cities could appear fully formed, then everything assumed about historical progress, cultural development, and human society requires reconsideration. The photographs were destroyed to preserve not just American identity, but the global narrative of gradual progress and development. They were eliminated to prevent questions that have no comfortable answers. Where did the original Americans go? Where did the new Americans come from? And who orchestrated this massive replacement? The philosophical collapse arrives with the vertigo-inducing force. If the photographic record of an entire decade could be systematically destroyed, if millions of people could be introduced without documentation, if history could be rewritten so completely that the rewriting itself becomes invisible, then what else in the accepted narrative is fabrication? The missing photographs of the 1870s represent more than lost images. They represent the deliberate destruction of reality in favor of narrative. Every assumption about American development, every celebrated achievement of the Gilded Age, every monument to industrial progress stands on foundations that cannot be verified because the evidence was eliminated. We inhabit a history that was written after the fact, designed to hide a transformation so fundamental that its revelation would unmake the world we think we know. Consider the rain still beating against the windows of the National Archives, each droplet now a reminder of the dissolution that comes to all things, even memories carved in silver and glass. The empty spaces in the archives aren't accidents but monuments to an intentional forgetting, a forced amnesia that shapes our present as surely as any remembered history. Somewhere, in dimensions we cannot access or realities we've been trained not to perceive, the true photographs of 1870s America might still exist, showing empty streets awaiting their new inhabitants, vacant buildings awaiting their new purposes, an entire continent in transition between one reality and another. But in this reality, in this carefully maintained narrative, those photographs are gone forever, leaving only questions that echo through the silence. Who were we before we became who we claim to be? And if they could erase a decade of photographs, what else have they erased from the light?